Welcome to Mid-Ice Crisis. I'm Josh Cybulski. Today on the show, we're going to be discussing the dumpster fire that is the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as one very pissed off Connor McDavid. Before we get into that, Mid-Ice Crisis is brought to you by Cwench Hydration. Head on over to quenchhydration.ca. Use our promo code SecondStoryPod to get 15% off at checkout. And you can use our direct link, which is www.quenchhydration.ca/secondstorypod. And if you like this show, please like, subscribe, share it around with your friends. Follow us on the social media stuff. We are everywhere. And this podcast is also available in audio form on all your podcatchers, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, all the fun stuff. Anyways, let's get into it. They suck. They are just awful this year. And there are a lot of reasons for it. People are going to say, well, they got a lot of injuries. Yeah, they really do. And it's testing their depth, which they seem to really have none. But I don't really want to talk so much about this year's version of the Leafs and like the on-ice product. I want to go into a little bit of a deep dive, a little history lesson on where this entire run, generation, iteration, whatever the hell you want to call it, but this version of the Leafs for the last 10 years, what went wrong and what is like the key component to their lack of success. So in order to do that, we have to look at a very large body of work dating back to 2015 when the Toronto Maple Leafs were also a shit show. If you can remember back even before then, just an absolute mess. And this is obviously before they had, the Mitch Marners, the Austin Matthews, the William Nylanders of the world. Obviously, John Tavares wasn't there either. Again, gong show, just an absolute mess of a team at the time. So going back to 2015, you look, the summer of 2015 is when they dealt Phil Kessel, the Pittsburgh Penguins. They got a very underwhelming package back for him that included the likes of Nick Spaulding, Scott Harrington, a first-round pick that ended up being quite late because obviously in 2016 the Penguins won the Cup. And that was sort of the kickoff, or we'll call it the genesis of their rebuild, which obviously has led up to where we are now. So let's deep dive a little bit in what the Penguins actually did. Or sorry, not the Penguins, the Maple Leafs and what they actually did. So obviously, Mike Babcock was one of the starting points of this whole thing. They hired him in 2015. Of course, they draft Mitch Marner in 2015 as well. That's June of 2015. They draft him 4th overall. He becomes a pretty foundational piece of what they're doing. 2016, the draft, they pick up Austin Matthews, obviously 1st overall pick. In between those two things, there was a lot of selling off, a lot of moves to get out from some, pretty bad contracts. They basically went into the tank in 2016 to get Austin Matthews. Obviously, he and Marner, along with Nylander, who came, later on, that's the foundation for your core. Those were, the big three that eventually became the big four. Throughout all that time, you've got asset accumulation, dealing veterans for picks and prospects and things like that. That continued into 2016. And that was where the kind of the starting point, Austin Matthews kicked off his career with a 4-goal game. And that was sort of the starting point of when the Leafs made their pitch to become relevant again. Obviously, at that point, Babcock was there and things like that. They had their top line pieces in Marner and Matthews. And that's it. That's where it all began. 2018, fast forward a little bit, they make the move. They signed John Tavares to the 7-year, $77 million deal. It's a major free agent acquisition that was supposed to sort of cement them as we're a Stanley Cup contender now. And obviously at the time, 7 years, $77 million was a lot of money for Tavares, but people looked at it as big cap, obviously big cap hit, but big salary cap jumps coming on the way. That was sort of the expectation that everybody had. The $11 million won't look so bad in 2 or 3 years. All is well. You go to the next year, 2019. The Leafs make a massive trade when they move Nazem Kadri along with a 3rd-round pick and Calle Rosen to the Colorado Avalanche for the likes of Alex Kerfoot, Tyson Barrie was part of that, and they got a late pick. I think it was like a 6th round pick. Now, in the deal, too, Tyson Barrie had some salary retained. Through this whole period, you've got Mike Babcock running the show. No playoff success, right? Get bounced in the first round a couple times. Bit of a shit show. We'll get into some of the other stories that prevailed from that period of time, but I'm looking strictly at roster dynamics and transactions to this point. 2020, this is a little bit of an aside. It's obviously not a roster transaction, but 2020, March 2020, it's the pandemic season. League shuts down. They go into the bubble for the playoffs. The Leafs get bounced in the playoffs by the Columbus Blue Jackets, who were awful. It was that play-in series, so technically they didn't even get to play in the first round of the playoffs, but they get bounced in the bubble, and that's it. Now, I will point out something. Prior to going into the bubble, the Leafs fired Mike Babcock. I believe they fired him in November of 2019. I should double check that to be sure. I'm running on memory here, folks. Just double check that. Yeah, November 20th, 2019. They were on a 6-game losing streak, and this is when the allegations started to break about a toxic work environment. So 2020, they get bounced in the bubble. The 2021, things get a little bit weird. The Leafs get, again, it's that North Division where Canada had to play in Canada. It was Ottawa, obviously Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. That was the North Division. The Leafs get bounced in the first round by the Montreal Canadiens. Again, this is 2021. Montreal goes on their run, and not a great look for the Leafs. That summer, Zach Hyman, notable forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs, walks away from the Leafs. Again, this is 2021. After the season. So Zach Hyman goes to Edmonton, signs an 8-year deal with the Oilers, obviously goes on to score 50 goals, become a pretty notable piece to them. Not a great move at the time. So now you've lost Nazem Kadri and you've lost Zach Hyman. I'm going to get the exact figure on Zach Hyman's deal. I was not prepared for that. Zach Hyman signs with Edmonton. 38. Oh, it's a 7-year deal. My bad. 7 years, $38.5 million. Would that work out too as a cap hit? Math is not my strong suit. No, they don't have the exact cap hit. It's something in the range of like 5.5. I think it's 5.5 million a season. Anyways, they let him walk away. Obviously, Hyman was a pretty big piece for Toronto. So now he's gone. And they never really found a way to replace his production from the wing. 2022, Leafs continue on. By the way, this whole time, something that is of note is the Leafs are just bleeding draft picks, right? They're going for it every year. You get a first rounder, you get a first rounder, you get a first rounder. Toronto doesn't keep first rounders. So this continued on. They did at one point get a first rounder back when they traded Kasperi Kapanen to the Pittsburgh Penguins, which was a very one-sided deal in Toronto's favor. They got a first round pick that ended up being like 15th overall for Kapanen, who eventually Pittsburgh had to waive because he sucked. So anyways, Kapanen goes. That was a pretty major piece that was the piece in the Phil Kessel deal, other than another first rounder. But Kapanen, I should have mentioned that earlier. But anyways, 2022, Toronto keeps tinkering with the roster. Moving a lot of players out and picks, obviously young players and picks. And, the Leafs continue to be a top regular season team through 2022. They still don't have much in the way of success in the playoffs. 2023. Oh, by the way, just as a callback, when it came time to sign the likes of Nylander and the likes of Matthews and the likes of Marner, Toronto basically let them dictate the terms of what the contracts would be. Nylander famously was held out. He eventually signed a deal with a $6.9 million cap hit, which ended up being, a fairly big bargain in my opinion. But when it came to the likes of Marner and Matthews, they didn't get max term on either player. Marner signed for 5 years, I think. What did Matthews sign? I think Matthews signed for even less. He might have been 4 years. But they didn't get max term on either player, and that's a very important note to make, because while they went shorter term with their players because they didn't get a whole lot of choice, the likes of Connor McDavid signed for 8 years. Leon Draisaitl took a long-term deal. Matthews was 5 years. So his second contract, which he signed February of 2019, prior to the pandemic, was 5 years, $58 million. So he had a cap hit of 11.6. And I believe Marner was a cap hit just shy of 11. I think he was like 10.9 on a 5-year deal. So either way, you don't get the 8-year term on either guy. So you have to go. And in the case of Marner, obviously he's in Vegas now. But in the case of Matthews, they had to sign him again. And that happened in 2023. And they end up paying him 4 years, $53 million, keeps him with the team, ends up being the highest cap hit in the league at the time. And that's where his contract currently sits, which is a cap hit of $13.25 million. Important points, right? 2023 rolls around. The Leafs give Sheldon Keefe, who would replace Mike Babcock, they give him an extension in 2023, multi-year deal. And then less than a year later, or I guess the next year, 2024, however you slice it, Keefe ends up getting turfed. They bring in Craig Berube to run the show. Different voice, Stanley Cup winning coach, et cetera, et cetera. They make some other staff shuffles. They add Lane Lambert as an associate coach. And they obviously continue to tinker with the roster pieces, retooling their depth and things like that. And then last summer, they make the signing of Tavares, which, I mean, obviously a great contract for Tavares, but they are kind of forced into trading Mitch Marner to Vegas for a very, Nicholas Roy. Really, it was kind of the price to pay for Vegas. Maybe tinkering. We don't really know. But they end up with Nick Roy back, who has not been great this year. Marner obviously goes to Vegas, signs the 8-year extension, and Toronto is left where they are. They bring in Dakota Joshua. Obviously, Michelli is another replacement for Marner. They don't properly make the moves to replace Marner. And that's where we are today. Now, that's just a quick and dirty version of sort of what went wrong. There were good moves along the way. There were obviously some bad moves. Bringing in Patrick Marleau was an interesting move. They gave him a 3-year deal, like $18 million. They end up trading him for the 3rd year of the deal to Carolina, along with a 1st-round pick. Carolina buys him out. He goes back to San Jose. So they effectively overpaid Marleau, ended up overpaying Carolina to get rid of him. Costs you a 1st-round pick. That shit adds up over time. There were others, but there were good signings along the way. I liked, the original Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi signings, the 1-year deals. I liked both of those. The Jake Muzzin trade at the time, I thought that trade was fine. Bringing in Stolarz last year was a really good signing. He was phenomenal last year. Obviously, this year he's hurt or what have you. I thought the Kapanen trade was a great trade for Toronto. Really just a horrible trade for Pittsburgh. So, there were wins along the way. But obviously, when you lose a Kadri and you lose a Hyman, those are the two guys, the types of players that really the Toronto Maple Leafs have been searching for all this time. That's what they've been after, is those type of guys. And they never found another Kadri. Kadri was that warrior type guy who was going to go to battle. And yeah, he got too many suspensions because he played over the edge in the playoffs and things like that. But moving him was just a disastrous move for the Leafs. And it sure worked out well for Colorado, though. They got the cup, obviously, in 2022, and he was a pretty central figure there. And here we are a few years later. He's in Calgary, terrible Calgary team, but Kadri's still a very effective player in his mid-30s. And a couple years left on his deal. Toronto could have used a guy like him. So, looking at the entire body of work, everything. Oh, let's not forget Kyle Dubas's exit in 2023. Dubas, turn your ringer off. Dubas sort of wore the brunt of what had gone wrong. A lot of people had sort of blamed him for all the roster moves that went wrong. Yeah, there were some mistakes in there, and I thought he didn't do a good job of handling the negotiations with the likes of Matthews and Marner and Nylander and stuff like that. But you got to wonder what Dubas felt about the whole thing. I've read things that Dubas wanted to move one of the big four at some point, and Brandon Shanahan didn't really want to. I don't know. it's hard to say what you actually buy into with that, but his exit was obviously a big story at the time. And I don't think Leafs fans have really forgiven Dubas. I think he took a lot of blame that he probably shouldn't have. So his exit was obviously a big deal. Brendan Shanahan was a central figure too. It was the Shanahan plan all along. And I honestly think like he wears, or he should wear at least, the vast majority of what went wrong, because he was the one making the decisions that ultimately led to this mess that Toronto's in. He's not there now. There was bringing in Brad Treliving, Jim's son. I don't think that was a good hire. I think it was a bit more of a kind of a panic hire, if anything. I don't think he had a track record that makes you think like, oh, this is the guy to bring in. But they did, and he's made some good moves and some bad moves, which is what most GMs do over time. So these were all big stories that happened, and it kind of leaves the Leafs where they currently are. So where did it all go wrong? What was, if you're going to look at one thing and be like, well, that's the thing that kind of messed Toronto up for the long run, I really think you got to look at what started it all. What started it all, where it was like the moment that like, yeah, we're in this rebuild and this new generation in Toronto. The thing that I see, and this is just my opinion, and you can make of it what you will, I see this as being the beginning of the end for the Toronto thing. And again, it was like one of the first things they ever did.
On Tuesday afternoon, Maple Leafs president and alternate governor Brendan Shanahan announced that Mike Babcock has been named the team's newest head coach. Babcock becomes the 30th head coach in Maple Leafs history. In 10 seasons behind the Detroit Red Wings bench, Babcock led the franchise in wins with 458. In his time with the Red Wings, the club won the President's Trophy twice and a Stanley Cup in 2008. Babcock also coached Team Canada to 2 consecutive gold medals in the Winter Olympic Games. Join us tomorrow morning right here on Leafs TV at 11 a.m. as he is introduced for the first time to Leafs Nation. Welcome to Toronto, Mike.
Yeah, welcome to Toronto, Mike. So that was 10 years ago. And I do just want to point out, this is on Toronto Maple Leafs YouTube. I do want to point out, look at the excitement. If you can see the comments. Oh, God, please, Mike, save the team. Yes, the Leafs finally made a good move. So happy. Great voiceover shot. I don't know. Leafs Swedish prospects Nylander, Lou Johnson, Nielsen, Granberg will be happy to have Bob Babcock to coach. He will maximize their talents. Oh, I'm sure they were thrilled. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Yeah, holy shit's right. Oh my God, yes, thank you. Yay, let the rebuild begin. Kessel frantically starts doing push-ups. That one's funny. This is insane. Yay, yes, rebuild started. Awesome. Sabres and Wings dislike this video. I don't think they do now. Yeah. Can't believe this. Finally, the Leafs are doing something right. Hindsight's funny. And the drain of greatness continues to flow from Detroit to Toronto. You Leafs are going to continue to blow. The Wings are demonstrably and verifiably, I think, the greatest sports team of all time. Well, that's simply not true, but partially true. We're not worthy. I have to say I'm shocked, but I'm not too sure Babcock can change the nature of the Leafs as they are. I think what the Leafs really need are some different players. I mean, let's face it, Pete Horacek basically said it like it is to the team, and they never change their ways. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Smart man gets paid more and gets 2 more months of vacation time. That's some funny stuff. Babcock needs to find a new hiding spot for Kessel's cookies. Patchwork rebuild confirmed. Well, that one's true. No, Mike, you're better in Detroit. No. A smart move by Toronto. Is this a fake video? Leafs better start to win. Realistically, we're not going to make the playoffs next year. Maybe in the second or third year we can do that. What do we think about that? Well, let me tell you what I think. First off, giving him complete control was nuts. And that's what they effectively did. They didn't just give him a deal or contract or whatever. They gave him the keys to the franchise. I think it was 8 years, $50 million. So it's like what does that work out to be? $6.25 million a year. It created a power imbalance that when you're trying to develop young players and develop a young lineup and trying to develop things like an organizational philosophy, all of it had to run through Babcock. They built their team around their coach, and it wasn't the other way around. And I think that was a mess because obviously, hindsight being what it is, Babcock exploited it, abused it, used it wrong, however you want to do it. So you're Toronto, you're entering this youth-driven era, right? You got these young stars, Marner, Nylander, Matthews. You'll throw Riley in there too. They had Kapanen, they had Kadri, they had a lot of talent. Hyman was coming up. I don't know if he's in the organization yet, but anyways. So you got all these young guys. And rather than empower your young guys, which is what teams like Chicago, I mean, we'll go like that, iffy on Chicago, but I mean, Pittsburgh did it. Tampa did it. The teams that went on to win cups did this. But that's not what Babcock did. Babcock overplayed his veterans, his grinder type players, if you will. He stapled his young players to the bench for teachable moments. And he refused to take his own system and adapt it to his young stars. Instead, he wanted his stars to adapt to him. And those, any parent will tell you that those early years matter. And now I'm talking, kids having children versus having young players. But these young players were impressionable and they're all trying to develop into really good NHLers and things like that. And, obviously a lot of them did. Matthews, Nylander, Marner were all star NHL players. But what Babcock did, I think, and obviously I'm not in their room and I'm not a fly on the wall, so I don't know this for sure, but I look at it and I think that what Babcock did with his behavior was he created this tension in their room and there was a mistrust and that never really healed in Toronto. And like his style, the old school system, it just didn't fit with modern NHLers. He was very rigid, conservative, like it was puck possession heavy, which is fine. But like being rigid and conservative, that shit worked in like 2008. But by, 2016, 17, 18, 19, the NHL had become more about like creativity and a speed game and showing, how dynamic you could be offensively. But like Babcock never adjusted to that. And it felt like Toronto always played with the brakes on. They were built to be, to play like a track meet style game. And they just, I don't know. It always felt like they played with a parachute, I guess. And then you have the whole thing where he burns his own players, right? He burns bridges with the players and things like that. And then obviously it became public. But the Mitch Marner incident, the list, hey, give me a list of who you think works the hardest, best to worst. Making a young player give you a list and then you tell them who it's from. Like, that's so shitty, man. That's like narcissistic behavior. And I've never met Mike Babcock, but Mike Babcock. But everything you hear about him, you go, well, that's a narcissist. He did obviously the list. There was scratching young players for no reason. I don't know this for a fact, but you kind of hear whispers that like forcing guys to play maybe when they shouldn't, manipulating people or personalities to like test them. All these stories came out. There's a lot of them too. And a lot of players kind of said their piece too. You have Johan Franzen after the fact talking about it. You've got obviously Mike Commodore famously talked about it. Ian White's talked about it. Mike Modano's talked about it. Mike Modano was one game away from playing his 1,500th career game. He was at 14.99. Last game of the regular season. Detroit's on their way to the playoffs. What does Babcock do? He scratches Mike Modano. Scratches him. Stay, you're not going to play. Did Mike Modano ever play his 1,500th? I don't feel like he did. This is Mike Modano, hockey reference. Look at this. 14.99. 1,499 career games. That's brutal. That is brutal. That's who Babcock was. Let's take a look at a couple videos here with regards to Babcock. And again, this is who he was in Toronto. So this is obviously the Marner incident. I'll show that one first. So here it is.
Well, what he had dealt with mentally at the hands of his coach, Mike Babcock. Babcock, who had a habit of singling certain players out humiliated Marner during his rookie year. As the story goes, Babcock began his sadistic tirade during a father and son road trip in January of 2017, and it was then that the coach confronted the rookie at the time about his apparent laziness and lack of effort. In order to make a point in his own mind, Babcock decided to have Marner rank the hardest working players down to the laziest on the team. To what was likely Babcock's pleasure, Marner listed his name at the bottom of the list, indicating that he was displaying the least amount of effort out of the entire Toronto Maple Leafs roster. But he also put Nazem Kadri and Tyler Bozak's names directly above his. And according to sources, Babcock decided to show the players a list which only humiliated Marner further. Therefore, after Marner decided to speak out about the incident years later, caused Babcock to lose his coaching position, Mitch Marner made it a point to reveal what he had done.
That is such shitty behavior. Like, just imagine doing that to a young star player who's on the up. Unreal. That's not even close, like, to it for Babcock either. Not even remotely close. There are other incidents. Let me just see if I can find the... Let's check here for the other one I wanted to show. This is Jay Rosehill on Leafs Morning Take talking about Mike Babcock. Again, this is who the Leafs hired to kick off this current iteration of the Leafs 10 years ago. Take a look.
I know someone that's worked very close to him in Saskatchewan, and I asked him how it was going. He said, the guy's a prick, man. He barely shows up. He dumps all the work on the people that shouldn't be doing it. He's arrogant as could be, and he's only there to say, hey, look at me giving back to the community. Give me a chance in the NHL again. He said that verbatim, face to face. It's not a rumor. That's how he acted in Saskatchewan, where, you know, how many things do you got to see? How many red flags have to come up before you just call a spade a spade? I mean, there's so many good people in the world of hockey. This does not come up with any of them, yet this guy just can't stay away from it. The writing's on the wall. This guy's a prick, and he seems to always be one. And whether everything that's ever said about him is deserved or not, this guy's a problem. I don't think we're going to see him for a long time.
So he's referencing the fact that Mike Babcock has a job did have a job at in Saskatchewan coaching college hockey. And he references the fact that perhaps it's to rehabilitate his image. This was before he got hired by the Columbus Blue Jackets and quickly fired by the Columbus Blue Jackets due to an incident where he, you know, allegedly asked to see players' phones and things like that. Ooh, man, that's who you hired to kick things off. And, you know, that explains a lot of things. And I'll kind of give you my take on it and why I feel that it does what I think it does. But here's another one. This is going back to Babcock's time in Detroit. And again, I'm piling on to prove a point, but this is another story about Mr. Mike Babcock. Take a look.
Starts benching Chelios the 2009 Winter Classic. He basically played 2 shifts. And then Chelly went in and poured beer in his water bottle, took his skates off, and just had beers on the bench.
That's great.
The Mike Modano, 1 game shy of 1,500 last game of the year when the Detroit Red Wings were already in the playoffs is a joke to be had. And if you go on Mike Modano's Hockey DB, it's $14.99, complete joke.
Wow, you can't do that to Mikey Mo.
We all know the Marner thing, but the Jason Spezza, first game as a Toronto Maple Leaf, his hometown, playing against his former team, Ottawa Senators, in the first fucking game of the year. The guy signs for $750, comes in to play that game, and Mike Babcock sits him out saying, we need some penalty killers on this. What the starts benching Chelsea.
I mean, that's some wild shit right there, right? That's some wild shit. To, you know, be doing all of that is, I mean, it just kind of, it tells you who Mike Babcock is as a person and who he was as a coach. Now, I haven't even gotten into the Mike Commodore story. I wonder if there's, I mean, I know he's talked about, Mike Commodore does a podcast with James Cybulski.
The only reason why I ever ended up going on Twitter and ripping, I was sitting in Carolina. I had just retired. And Babs, it was his first game back in Detroit after he went to Toronto. I had no intentions of saying, no intentions. And I never viewed this Babcock thing like going on for almost a decade now. Like, that was not my plan. I had no plans of doing any of this shit. And I was sitting at the bar. I had a couple cocktails, and Chris Chelios messaged me. He's like, "Hey, Commie, Toronto's in Detroit tonight. You should rip Babs on Twitter." I'm like,
you shit disturber.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm like sitting there at the bar. I've had 5 or 6 doubles, and I'm like, I go, really? He's like, yeah, I think you should. I'm like, okay, if I do this, I need to be comfortable that I'm not trying to get a job in hockey. So, like, I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not looking for a job in hockey. I hate Babs more. Screw it. The only reason.
That's pretty funny, actually. So, Mike Commodore was coached by Babs early in his career and then ended up going to Detroit. And he had actually had a phone conversation with Babcock about it and basically said, like, are you going to, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically said, like, are you going to screw me? And Babs was like, no, we really want you on the team. And then Mike Commodore ended up being a healthy scratch for quite a bit of the season. And then eventually, mercifully, got traded to Tampa Bay. And that was kind of the end of his career. But look, so why does it all matter? Like, why does Babcock starting off, why do I theorize that that's sort of the downfall of the Leafs? Well, you're talking about their development curve, right? Like, that's the time where they're developing, obviously, their game, but also just like psychologically, things like confidence, leadership, securely, just like consistency, your habits, all those things come. And if you have a coach that you don't trust, even though you're talented, you're going to feel insecure. You're going to feel like you can't get traction. You're going to feel like you have the wrong habits, and you're just going to feel distrusting of everything. And that, to me, I look at those things and as a culture within a dressing room, like, that handcuffed the Toronto Maple Leafs big time. You know, even when Babcock left in 2019, they brought in Sheldon Keefe. Like, he was much more of a player's coach. In fact, like, I don't think I would ever say anything bad about Sheldon Keefe. Like, obviously, I've never met him, but I know a lot of guys who played for him in juniors because he was a coach in Pembroke, which I grew up, 45 minutes from Pembroke. A lot of guys I knew played junior for him, and they have nothing but praise to say about Sheldon Keefe and what a great coach he was and leader and mentor and things like that. Like, Sheldon Keefe probably would have been the right coach at the time going back to 2016. And I do wonder, if they had him in there first when everybody was kind of maturing, I think it would have made a massive difference to the, everything that surrounded the Leafs over the next decade. Because those early years, those like critical first couple of playoffs, where you're like in your peak development, they did not have someone that could be a mentor, someone that they could trust, that could actually lead them. They needed a guy who was a player's coach, more progressive, more modern, to guide them through a very tough development. Like, those first few years in the NHL were likely the toughest of their career. But like, Babcock wasn't coaching them. He was trying to shape them in the mold that he wanted. And, for Toronto, they've been trying to unwind that ever since. And they haven't been able to. And I don't know that you get away from that until everybody that was in that room with him is dealt. They're done and dusted. And that's kind of it. But shit, man, like, that's, to me, is the essence of what happened in the Leafs. Like, the Babcock hiring, one of the first things they did, and that just distorted the entire rebuild. Comment below if you agree with me, disagree with me, what you think the turning point or the downfall of the Leafs was. But for me, it's got to be Babcock's hiring and where everything went with him. All right, so to close out the show, I want to get to this other story, and this is I'm going to play a little clip for you from a couple nights ago after the Edmonton Oilers had lost 8-3 to the Dallas Stars, and I found this to be very interesting. I'm not sure how much of it I'll play, but this to me was a fascinating interview to look at. Take a look.
There were maybe some positive signs towards the end of that trip, Connor. How do you kind of account for what showed up in that first period?
Yeah, not good. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have many answers for you here tonight. I don't know. I don't have any answers, as I said.
So big picture defensively is something you guys have, been struggling with this year more than in previous years. So how concerning is it that the D side of the game is as far off as it is right now?
I think it stems from the whole thing. We're not good enough with the puck. And, it's leading to sustained, time in our D zone. yeah, it's the whole thing. We're not getting up the ice, not forechecking pucks back, and we're playing too much in the D zone. There's not many D zone systems that hold up after 30, 40 a minute in your D zone. It's tough to defend.
It's hard to measure maybe, but I guess you've felt it with yourself and with teammates over the years. What's the gap between where you guys are now and when you feel confident?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously not very good tonight. The gap seems pretty far tonight, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. You're asking me to measure the gap. I don't know what the gap is between us playing our best and where we're at right now. It's obviously pretty far.
So there's games where you're maybe not going to have it and need to figure out ways to get back into games. There seems to be a lot of nights this year, Connor, where your group is struggling to figure out how to re-engage in games. Are you sensing that, and why?
Well, yeah. There's definitely been two significant ones where we've let it get away on us. Both here on home ice, both unacceptable. So, have to find a way to generate our own momentum, our own energy, our own, and find a way to get ourselves going.
Your goaltending comes under a lot of flack. I just wonder what you think about that, especially after
This is the point I want to get to.
I really feel like goaltending is a team thing. Tougher goalies to look good when the group in front of them is not playing well. I don't really care who it is. When the team in front of them is not playing up to their standards, then tough for a goalie to look good. Felt bad for both of them tonight.
Yeah, feel bad for both of them. All right, so I wanted to get to the goaltender part. Obviously, he's pissed. You could tell. He is not feeling it in Edmonton. And, he bails out his goaltender. To be honest, he's right. I mean, he really is correct in the way that he's thinking. It's partially the goaltending, but it's definitely not all the goaltending. Now, if you were to go and just check out traditional numbers for the Oilers, their goaltending looks horrific. But the thing is a lot of those traditional numbers don't necessarily explain the whole story. So just check this out. Let's look at the Oilers here. So the 10-10-5, obviously not great, 5th in the Pacific. But check this out. Goals for, 6th. Good stuff. Goals against, 32nd. Worst in the league, right? Oh, what a goaltending issue. Now you come down, check out the numbers. Of course, McDavid and Draisaitl doing the bulk of the damage along with Bouchard. Roslovic's having a good year offensively. Fine. Come down here and you get to, I think I passed it actually. There we go. Goaltenders. How's that goaltending doing? Let's look. Record 8-7-3, 2-3-2. Okay, great. Save percentage 878. Well, that's shitty. 847 for Pickard. Oof, that's rough too. Check out the goals against. 318 for Skinner. That's not ideal. And then 404. Not great either. Now let's pop over and check out a different metric, one that I believe is more reflective of the goaltending itself, and that is goals saved above expected. So we're going to pop over to moneypuck.com. Let's have a look at that. How are the Oilers goaltending faring with that? These are some advanced stats. People are going to go, oh, but it's the numbers, it's the math, people. I don't give a fuck. Look, goal save above expected, 1. Pickard obviously down a couple. What this tells you is that Skinner's been about average this season, while Pickard, whatever the hell you want to call him, he's been slightly below average. How does that play with last year? And by the way, I think this is a criticism of the Oilers because I don't think that's ideal. But look at last year. Oh, slightly below average goaltending for Skinner and very below average for Pickard. Go back to 2023. Pickard average, Skinner average, Jack Campbell in 5 games was dog shit. Cool. Let's check out the playoffs here. Pop to the playoffs. Skinner average, Pickard average. Go last year's playoffs. Skinner literally average, Pickard below average. Let's go even for funsies. Go back another year. Skinner well below average, Campbell above average. Why do I point all this out? Well, I kind of make a McDavid's point for him here, right? It's not necessarily the goaltending. Could they have better goaltending? Yeah, that'd be real good if you had somebody that could stand on their head. That would mask a lot of the problems with this team. But the problem with the team is defense. They can't play it. They don't have players that can play it. They got Darnell Nurse making $9.25 million. And he sucks. You got Evan Bouchard making $10.5 million. He can't play defense. He brings a lot of offense, and that's good, but he can't play defense. That's half of your top four that literally is unable to play in the defensive zone very well. Problem. Big problem. $20 million right there of two guys on your defensive core that can't play. That's a big issue. Now, okay, those are your Oilers issues. My issue here is I like Connor McDavid. I love his game, obviously. I think he's on the ice. He's just so impactful. He's the best player in the world, obviously, and he's electric on the ice. He's boring as hell off the ice, but that's, whatever. But he is speechless in this interview. He does not know what to say. He's just like, I don't know. Yeah, we suck. I don't know. That's the whole interview. And it goes through this mix of like feeling really terrible or like being kind of mad about what's going on. And he should be, because he signed a 2-year deal to give Edmonton a chance to show that they can build a winner around him. And again, the Oilers are in the same place they've been. Their record was very similar last year. Obviously, they went on a run, went to the finals, and lost. But, people are going to say, well, they've gone to 2 finals, give them a chance to turn it around. Okay. They might go to a finals again this year. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with them. But the problem is that the issues that were bothering the team a couple years ago are the same issues that are currently bothering this team. Their depth is bad. Their defense is bad. Their goaltending's not good. They don't have a lot of support for McDavid and Draisaitl. It's very top heavy. That's been the issue all along. And, maybe they get it together. They go on a run. They make it to the finals again. Who knows? Maybe they even win. But if I'm Connor McDavid, I'm looking at the 2-year deal I signed, and I'm going, shit, what a mistake. And I actually thought it was a mistake at the time he signed it. Not because of the money. You're leaving money on the table. I mean, he doesn't really need it. He's doing fine. He's made a lot of money in his career already. He's going to make a lot more. It's not the money aspect. I totally get giving a discount to your team because you want to win. And I can understand the point of view of wanting to be loyal to the team and the fans and stuff like that. I get all of it. My issue for McDavid is, why did you not wait? Why did you not wait till the end of this season to see how it played out? I cannot understand the urgency that he showed to sign this deal with Edmonton. Now, there's obviously a reason that he has, but maybe it was the team was making a threat, like, we're going to tear it down. I don't see that. You don't threaten a guy like McDavid. But the thing is he had all the leverage in this situation. And he could have kept all of the leverage until the end of the year and went to market and then changed the landscape of the NHL by deciding to go to a different place. He could have done that and got paid a lot more money. Again, money's not the driving factor, but he could have picked his destination. He could have gone anywhere he wanted, picked any winner. Could have gone anywhere. But he didn't. He would have been the first generational player in NHL history to actually hit the open market at the time where they're playing like the generational player. That's the thing. Gretzky hit free agency, but he wasn't the generational superstar anymore. He was a man in his mid-30s who was still a real good player, but wasn't a dominant force. McDavid could have hit the market as a dominant force, and we've never seen that. But that would have changed the NHL landscape, I think. And I think for McDavid, I wonder, watching this interview, if he's starting to regret that a little bit. I know I would, but I would have never done it. I would have kept, if you have the power at that point, I would have kept it till the absolute last minute before making a decision. Because again, he could have gone anywhere and gotten anything that he wanted. But he chose the Oilers out of loyalty, probably to the fans, probably to the organization, the city, etc. He's still going to get his money when he's 31. But, man, I wonder if he's regretting it right now. It sure looks like he is. So, tough one for him. I feel bad for the guy. You never want to see him out of the playoffs. I hope the Oilers can turn it around. I do think they will. I'm worried about some of the stuff I'm reading. They're talking about like trading for a goalie. I hope they trade for Tristan Jarry for a couple of reasons. I don't think he's necessarily the answer, but I want him off of Pittsburgh's books because you never know what you're going to get with him. But on the personal side, I'd like to see him go to Edmonton and actually put a run together. And I'd like the Oilers to figure out their goaltending to maybe get this thing over the finish line and actually win a cup. But I don't think goaltending is what they really need. I mean, it'd be nice to upgrade, and I think they still should look for an upgrade, somebody who can maybe steal them a series. I don't think Tristan Jarry's it. But I think they really need to upgrade their defense. They have to look to find players who can actually be mobile and play defense. That's what they got to find. And that would be my first priority on the checklist before I'm starting to look for a goalie. But just my 2 cents. Anyways, comment in the comment section. What do you think the Oilers should do? Do you think McDavid regrets his decision? So thanks so much for tuning in. Again, thanks to our sponsor, Cwench Hydration. Head on over to quenchhydration.ca/secondstorypod. Get your 15% discount on any of their products. Thanks so much for watching the show. Please, if you enjoy the show, like and subscribe. You'll find us on YouTube, obviously in the video form. We're also available on audio form on all the podcatchers, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google. Find us there. Please like, subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We're everywhere, or X, whatever. We're everywhere. So follow along. Please like and subscribe. Share the videos around. And we appreciate your support. Have yourselves a good week.